The Rakari's condescending laughter abruptly ceased as the thunderous report of Jason's revolver echoed across the alien landscape. Mocking grins contorted into expressions of utter disbelief as they watched the impossible unfold before their eyes. The primitive chemical-propelled projectile, fired from a crude human weapon they had dismissed as a harmless relic, had punched a clean hole straight through the ultra-hard alloy block that their own advanced anti-particle beam barely scratched. Jason Simmons, human explorer and adventurer, was not having a good day. After crash landing on the technologically advanced alien planet Rakaria and being unceremoniously captured, he found himself at the center of an impromptu cultural exchange with the Rakari leader Orin. An exchange that began with mockery and demands that Jason relinquish his primitive human weapons. And now, this. A tense showdown with the fate of Jason's freedom and possibly the future of human-Rakari relations hanging in the balance. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. This was meant to be a routine exploration mission, another thrilling escapade in the fabled life of Jason Simmons. He'd gotten out of plenty of tight scrapes before, but as he watched the armed Rakari warriors close in around him, he knew this time was different. If he couldn't convince these arrogant aliens of humanity's worth, and fast, he'd be lucky if all he lost was his freedom. When Orin had laughingly challenged him to pit his antique revolver against their most advanced handheld weapon, Jason saw a glimmer of opportunity. But he also knew he had just one shot, literally, to turn this dire situation around. The stakes couldn't be higher. Not only his own life hung in the balance, but the Rakari's perception of his entire species. If he failed, humans would forever be dismissed as a primitive, inferior race, unworthy of the stars. But if he succeeded, it could mark the beginning of a new era of interstellar cooperation, or at least a healthy dose of respect. As the astonished Rakari stared at the hole in the alloy block, then back at the small, primitive gun in Jason's hand, an uneasy silence settled over the landscape. A silence broken only by the soft clicks as Jason calmly reloaded the revolver, never taking his steely gaze off Orin. The time for laughter and mockery was over. It was time the Rakari learned that underestimating humanity was a mistake they could not afford to make again. With the echoes of the revolver's thunderous report still ringing in the air, Orin's haughty demeanor crumbled. His eyes darted from the perforated alloy block to Jason's intense look, a mix of disbelief and reluctant respect etched on his alien features. After a long, tense moment, Orin let out a low, guttural growl. "Very well, human," he spat, as if the words were poison on his tongue. "A deal is a deal. My engineers will assist in repairing your primitive vessel." Jason nodded curtly, his grip on the revolver never wavering. "Let's get to work then." As the Rakari engineers begrudgingly set about repairing Jason's ship, the human explorer kept a watchful eye on their progress. At first, everything seemed to be going smoothly. The alien technicians worked efficiently, their advanced tools making quick work of the damage. But as the hours stretched on, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. He noticed the engineers exchanging furtive glances when they thought he wasn't looking, their hushed whispers too low for his translator to pick up. And then there were the accidents, a misaligned component here, a faulty repair there. It didn't take long for Jason to realize the truth. The Rakari were subtly sabotaging his ship, trying to keep him stranded on their world. His suspicions were confirmed when he caught a glimpse of the Rakari engineers huddled around his ship's faster-than-light drive, their tools probing and prodding at the advanced technology. They were trying to reverse engineer it, to unlock the secrets of human ingenuity for their own gain. Jason's hand tightened around his revolver as he strode towards the group, his voice low and dangerous. "Step away from the drive, now." The engineers froze, their eyes wide with surprise and fear. But before Jason could press his advantage, a new voice cut through the tension. "Seize the human." Jason spun to see Orin standing at the head of a group of armed warriors, their weapons trained on the lone human. The Rakari leader's eyes gleamed with malice, his earlier humiliation forgotten in the face of this new opportunity. "Did you really think I would let you leave with your technology intact?" Oren sneered. You are a threat to our superiority, human, and threats must be eliminated. The warriors advanced, their weapons humming with deadly energy, but just as they were about to close in on Jason, a barrage of plasma bolts tore through their ranks. The human whirled to see a small group of Rakari, led by a young, fierce-eyed engineer, standing defiantly against Oren's forces. Zek, one of the loyalist engineers gasped. What are you doing? What we should have done long ago, Zek replied, his voice ringing with conviction. Oren's rule is a tyranny. It's time for change. He turned to Jason, his expression hard but hopeful. Human, we offer you a deal. Help us overthrow Oren, and we'll ensure your ship is repaired and you're free to leave. But we need your help. Jason hesitated, his mind racing. He was no revolutionary, no hero out to save alien worlds from their own despots. But as he looked at the determined faces of the rebels, the pieces started to fall into place. If any species should understand the importance of freedom, how revolution and rebellion could reshape entire civilizations, it was his own. Allies against oppression? Say no more, Jason said with a grin, twirling his revolver. Let's take back what's yours and show these bastards what happens when you cross humanity. The Rakari warriors fired, but Jason was already moving, darting between the bolts of superheated plasma as he sprinted for the concealed elevator he knew led back to where they had examined his revolver. Zek ran interference, his own plasma rifle sizzling and steaming in the chill air. With a rebel at his side and his ship on the line, Jason reached the proving grounds in record time. His revolver and ammo belt were right where he'd left them, the ancient human weapons dwarfed by the gleaming alien tech. All right, Zek, Jason growled, checking his rounds. Let's kick some plutocratic ass and get off this rock. Zek's answering grin was all teeth. Together, they took off running once more, heading for where Oren's forces battled the rebels around Jason's grounded ship. Jason's revolver flashed, dropping 3 Rakari warriors before they even saw him coming. 2 shots, center mass, just like in the Westerns. For an ancient weapon, it was surprisingly effective, especially against adversaries used to energy weapons and no projectiles. The battle was joined, Zek's rebels moving with guerrilla precision, striking and fading, using the ship itself as cover. They knew they were outmatched in firepower and numbers, but they had the advantage of surprise and desperation. Jason found himself back-to-back with Zek, the unlikely allies holding off a squad of Oren's best. The revolver barked again and again, sending supersonic slivers of lead tearing through the smoke and chaos. But even as the last warrior fell, a new threat emerged from the haze. Oren himself, a plasma rifle in his hands and murder in his eyes. I will destroy you myself, human! The Rakari leader roared, bringing his weapon to bear. Jason dove to the side as a bolt of searing plasma scorched the air where he'd been standing. He came up in a smooth roll, revolver already tracking his target. You want to dance, big boy? Jason called out, a savage grin splitting his face. Then let's dance. Oren fired first, a blistering volley that would have reduced Jason to ashes if he'd been a hair slower. But the human was already moving, his revolver spitting lead in retaliation. The Rakari leader staggered as a bullet found his shoulder, spinning him halfway around. His rifle clattered to the ground as he clutched at the wound, shock and pain warring on his face. Jason kept his revolver trained on Oren, his voice hard. It's over. Honor our deal and let me go in peace, unless you want to find out what else this primitive weapon can do. For a long, tense moment, Oren glared at the human, hatred and humiliation burning in his eyes. But as Zek and the other rebels emerged from the smoke, the fight drained out of him. You win, human, he spat, his voice thick with loathing. Take your ship and go. Jason almost couldn't believe it was over. But as he looked around at the rebels, at Zek's hopeful face, he realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something bigger. Zek, The young rebel clapped him on the shoulder, his smile bright despite the grime of battle. We owe you a great debt, Jason Simmons. May this be the beginning of a new era between our people. Jason could only nod, his throat suddenly tight. He holstered his revolver and headed for his ship, the weight of the galaxy somehow lighter on his shoulders. As he fired up the repaired engines and lifted off, he looked down at the alien world below. A world he'd reshaped, if only by accident, a world that would never again underestimate the potential of humanity. With a grin, Jason punched in the coordinates for his next adventure. The galaxy awaited, and humanity would be ready. Jason's ship streaked through the inky void of space, leaving Rakaria behind. He input coordinates for the nearest human outpost, eager to report his wild encounter. His mind raced, replaying the events of the past few days. The crash, the standoff, the rebellion. It felt like a lifetime had passed. A shrill beep from the console snapped him back to reality. Jason leaned forward, frowning at the readout. An anomalous energy signature pulsed from a nearby system, originating from a remote moon. "Well, I'll be damned," Jason muttered, fingers dancing across the controls. His curiosity got the better of him, and he altered course to investigate. The moon loomed large in his view screen as he approached. Its pockmarked surface revealed nothing unusual, but as Jason circled lower, he spotted it. A massive structure nestled in a crater, shielded from casual observation. He set the ship down a discreet distance away and exited, heart pounding. The facility sprawled before him, a maze of interconnected buildings and landing pads. Jason crept closer, keeping to the shadows. A patrol of Rakari guards rounded a corner. Jason ducked behind a stack of crates, holding his breath. Their conversation drifted to him on the thin atmosphere. "Lord Orin wants results. The human drive must be cracked." Jason's blood ran cold. Orin was alive, and after his ship's drive. Before he could process this, rough hands seized him from behind. "Intruder!" a harsh voice barked. Jason struggled, but he was outnumbered and quickly subdued. The guards marched him through winding corridors until they reached a large chamber. There, seated on a makeshift throne, was Orin. The former leader's eyes glittered with malice. "Ah, the human returns. How convenient." "You're supposed to be dead," Jason spat. Orin laughed. "Reports of my demise were greatly exaggerated. Now let me show you what your little revolution has wrought." He gestured to a bank of screens displaying schematics of Jason's ship. "Your faster-than-light drive is the key to our ascension. With it, we'll build a fleet to retake Rakaria and forge a new empire among the stars." Meanwhile, on Rakaria, Zek paced before the Council of Elders. "Orin has vanished. We must act now, before he can regroup." The head elder raised a hand. "We will not provoke further conflict based on speculation. The matter is closed." Zek stormed out, fists clenched. He found his most trusted rebels waiting. "The council won't help. We're on our own." They nodded grimly. "What's the plan?" "We find Orin," Zek said, "and we finish this." Days later, Zek's team infiltrated the moon base. They moved silently through the facility, disabling guards and searching for Jason. They found him in a holding cell, haggard but alive. "Took you long enough," Jason quipped as Zek picked the lock. Alarms blared. They sprinted through the corridors, exchanging fire with Orin's forces. They fought their way to the main lab, where Jason saw his disassembled drive laid out on workbenches. "They're close to cracking it," he realized with horror. "If they succeed—" Jason's mind raced. There was only one way to stop this. He turned to Zek. "I need to get to my ship, now." They battled their way to the landing pad where Jason's ship sat. He quickly explained his plan as they ran. "You're insane," Zek shouted over the firefight. "Probably," Jason agreed, inputting commands into his ship's computer. "But it's our only shot." The drive core began to hum ominously. Jason and Zek's team sprinted for their own ship as reality itself began to warp around the facility. They barely cleared the moon's atmosphere when a blinding flash erupted behind them. The entire base imploded, consumed by the artificial singularity. In the aftermath, the Rakari Council convened an emergency session. Evidence of Orin's treachery was laid bare, along with the staggering implications of his plans. The head elder turned to Jason, who stood before them with Zek at his side. "You have saved us all from a terrible fate. We are in your debt." Another elder stepped forward. As a gesture of our gratitude and respect, we bestow upon you honorary citizenship of Rakaria. You will always be welcome in our territories. The council murmured in agreement. Then the head elder raised his voice once more. Furthermore, we propose the establishment of an embassy on Earth to open formal relations between our peoples. Jason bowed his head, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. As he looked up, he caught Zek's eye. The Rakari rebel grinned, and Jason knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter for both their species. Jason's ship screamed through hyperspace, every system redlined as he pushed the engines to their limits. The distress call from Rakaria played on repeat in his mind, driving him forward with grim urgency. As he dropped out of FTL on the outskirts of the Rakari system, his eyebrows furrowed at the sight before him. A massive alien armada swarmed around Rakaria, their ships sleek and predatory. The planet's orbital defenses were in tatters, debris fields marking where proud Rakari vessels once stood. Jason's comm crackled to life with a familiar voice. "Jason, thank the gods you're here." Zek's voice was strained, the sounds of battle audible in the background. "Get planetside now. I'll brief you on the situation." Dodging incoming fire, Jason's ship streaked through the atmosphere, touching down at a hidden base. Zek rushed to meet him, now wearing the insignia of a general. His face was haggard, eyes haunted by days of relentless combat. "The Grex!" Zek spat the name. "Insectoid bastards picked up our FTL transmissions. Now they want the tech for themselves." He led Jason to a command center, holographic displays showing the dire situation. Rakari ships were vastly outgunned, their formations crumbling under the onslaught. "We're out of options," Zek said, his voice hollow. "But maybe this can turn the tide." He handed Jason a familiar weight, his old revolver, meticulously maintained. Jason's eyes widened. "You kept it?" Zek nodded. "Its rounds might penetrate their armor. We're mounting a last-ditch assault on their flagship. You in?" Jason checked the cylinder, a grim smile on his face. "Let's show these bugs what happens when you mess with humanity's friends." They sprinted to a waiting fighter, Jason strapping in as Zek relayed final instructions. The ship rocketed skyward, joining a ragtag squadron of Rakari vessels. The Grek's flagship loomed ahead, a chitinous monstrosity overflowing with weaponry. Jason's fingers danced across the controls, corkscrewing through a hail of plasma fire. A well-placed shot disrupted the flagship's shields, creating a momentary gap. "Now!" Jason shouted, diving for the breach. His fighter screamed through, smoke trailing from scorched wings as he crash-landed in a docking bay. A squad of Rakari commandos poured out of stealth shuttles, forming up around him. Chittering shrieks filled the air as Grek's warriors swarmed towards them. Jason's revolver roared, the thunderous reports echoing through alien corridors. Carapaces shattered under the impact of heavy rounds, ichor spraying as the bugs fell. "Push forward!" Jason yelled, providing covering fire as the Rakari advanced. They fought their way deeper into the ship, Jason's revolver clearing a path through waves of Grek's soldiers. Finally, they reached the central chamber. A massive figure loomed within, the Grek's queen, encased in gleaming exoskeleton armor. Plasma bolts splashed harmlessly off her hide as she screeched in fury. "Focus fire on that joint!" Jason pointed to a barely visible weak spot. "I'll keep her busy." He darted out, revolver blazing. The queen's attention snapped to him, mandibles clicking in rage. Acid sprayed from glands, eating through Jason's suit. He gritted his teeth against the pain, leading the monstrosity on a deadly dance through the reactor core. His revolver clicked empty save for a single round. The queen's stinger lashed out, inches from impaling him. Time slowed as Jason lined up his shot, squeezing the trigger. The round struck true, detonating the queen's internal acid sac. She shrieked, convulsing as caustic fluid ate through delicate systems. Warning klaxons blared as the reactor went critical. "Move!" Jason shouted, sprinting for the extraction point. They barely made it to their ships as the flagship detonated in a spectacular fireball. In the aftermath, Jason stood with Zek, surveying the devastation wrought upon Rakaria. The planet was scarred, its cities in ruins. "We can't stay here," Zek said softly. "The Grecs will return." Jason nodded, a plan already forming. "I know some colonies that would welcome you. It's time for a new beginning." Months later, Jason watched as the last Rakari transport departed their ravaged homeworld. His revolver, now retired from a legendary career, sat in a place of honor in the new joint human Rakari capital. Jason's weathered hands gripped the podium, his once sharp eyes scanning the diverse crowd before him. Humans and Rakari sat side by side in the Grand Assembly Hall, a sight that still filled him with awe even after all these years. "Friends," he began, his voice carrying the weight of decades. "We stand on the precipice of a new era. Tomorrow's summit will cement the bonds between our peoples, forged in the fires of adversity." A young Rakari diplomat raised a tentacle in question. "Ambassador Simmons, what of those who still resist integration?" Jason sighed, recalling the long road that had led them here. "Change is never easy, but we must persevere. Our strength lies in unity." As the meeting adjourned, Jason's aide approached with an urgent message. "Sir, there's been a change to the transport schedule. We need to make an unscheduled stop en route to the summit." Hours later, Jason's ship docked at a nondescript station. He stepped into the airlock, flanked by Rakari delegates. The door hissed open, revealing a squad of armed figures in unmarked armor. "What is the meaning of—" Jason's protest was cut short as a stun blast struck him in the chest. He crumpled to the deck, consciousness fading as rough hands dragged him away. Jason awoke in a stark cell, his joints aching from the cold metal floor. A view screen flickered to life, revealing a face twisted with hate. "Welcome, Ambassador," the man sneered. "I am Commander Vex of Earth First. Your misguided quest ends here." Jason struggled to his feet. "You're making a terrible mistake. The Rakari are our allies, our friends." Vex's laughter chilled Jason to the bone. "Friends? They're parasites leeching off humanity's generosity. But you'll see the truth soon enough." The screen shifted, showing a familiar object, Jason's old revolver, mounted on a pedestal like a holy relic. "Remember this?" Vex taunted. "The weapon that proved human superiority. We'll use it to reclaim our destiny." Jason's heart sank as Vex revealed their plan. A neutrino beam, capable of destabilizing entire worlds. Their first target, New Andara, home to millions of Rakari refugees. "You can't," Jason pleaded. "Those are innocent lives." Vex's eyes gleamed with madness. "Sacrifices must be made for the greater good." Jason watched in horror as Earth First ships decloaked around New Andara. The colony's shields buckled under their assault. Panicked transmissions flooded the comms as the neutrino beam powered up. A new signal cut through the chaos. Jason's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the voice. "This is General Zek of the Rakari Defense Force. I won't let you destroy my people's new home." A lone fighter streaked across the view screen, engines blazing. It plunged directly into the path of the neutrino beam. The resulting explosion lit up space, the antimatter core detonating in a blinding flash. When the light faded, New Andara still hung in the void, unscathed. Vex howled in rage, hurling Jason's revolver across the room. It clattered to the floor at Jason's feet. Time seemed to slow as Jason's fingers closed around the familiar grip. He spun, squeezing the trigger. Vex's chest erupted in a spray of red. More Earth First extremists poured into the room, and Jason's revolver sang its deadly song one final time. Pain blossomed in Jason's side as return fire found its mark. He slumped against the wall, his gaze drawn to the view screen. There, in the fiery remnants of Zek's ship, he saw his old friend's face. No words passed between them, only a look of understanding, of a shared history of sacrifices made, of a dream that would outlive them both. Darkness crept into Jason's vision. His last thoughts were of hope, hope that his actions and Zek's sacrifice would not be in vain. Across human space, Word of the Earth-first atrocity spread like wildfire. Humans and Rakari alike took to the streets, united in their outrage. The extremists' remaining cells were rooted out and crushed, their twisted ideology rejected by the very people they claimed to champion. On Earth, a solemn procession wound its way through crowded streets. Jason's flag-draped coffin passed by, carried on the shoulders of human and Rakari honor guards. The people lining the route bowed their heads in respect, honoring the man who had given his life for their shared future. At the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro, now home to Earth's primary spaceport, a small group gathered around a furnace. With great reverence, they placed Jason's battered revolver into the flames. As the metal began to glow, the assembled diplomats spoke words of peace and unity. The molten remains were carefully collected and loaded into a probe. Its engines ignited, carrying the last remnants of Jason's revolver on a final journey into the heart of Seoul.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.